Welcome to the Womenomics Podcast.
Womenomics Podcast.
Womenomics Podcast.
Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. I have a super special guest, my co-host. I want her to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her services. And before she gets started, I just want you to know that we are in for a special treat. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Corinne Jones. I am the owner of Freedom Notary Services based in Maryland. I am a notary public. I do loan signing services, general notary work, and I also provide tools and coaching for my fellow notaries on how to expand their services through digital products.
Yes. So we are so super excited. I have to ask you, Corinne, when did you know that you could be an entrepreneur?
I did not always know that I could be an entrepreneur. My entire life, I wanted to have a good government job or a good paying job in any industry. So I worked really hard to get a job. And in 2020, all of that changed because I had a very stressful job. I had to leave the job and I began to look for another job. And what ended up happening during my search during the height of COVID, I realized jobs weren't readily available because there were a lot of freezes. And so one day as I was on my job search, my son came in and he told me, "Mom, why don't you just get like a side hustle?" And I was like, a side hustle? Like, I just want to get another full-time job. And I started to explore the idea of a side hustle. Long story short, I saw loan signing opportunities on YouTube, and I started to look into that. And I realized that I could become an entrepreneur by becoming a notary public and providing my services to real estate agencies and title companies. And so the rest has been history. And so over time, I began to kind of learn the nuts and bolts of having my own business. And so, yeah, so I'll say it's been about 2 years since I've known that I could actually be an entrepreneur.
Okay, so 2 years. And I'm sure in those 2 years you dealt with, it's such a transition to go from that 9-to-5 mindset to that business ownership mindset. And, along that, what are some of the challenges that you face making those transitions?
I think the biggest challenge is the scheduling part. When you have a 9-to-5 job, you get there, for example, at 9 o'clock, you get off at 5 o'clock, everything is very regimented. But when you have your own business, especially as a solo entrepreneur, you wear many hats. So you're the marketing director, transportation, you are administration, human resources, and creative director. You have to come up with all these things. And so as you build your business, there's no limits to what you can be creating. And there's so many needs that need to be filled as you develop it. So I think that was the biggest shift. At 5 o'clock, I wasn't done. Even though I have a family and I have to take care of my household, I still have to do a lot of background work in order to then provide services to the public. So that was the biggest shift. There's no days off. But I also recognize the need. It's even especially important to have the need for balance, even though you're constantly on because you have to create and develop and solve problems constantly. So I think I've learned a lot. There's a huge learning curve with that, but I still have challenges with that because my entire life was kind of programmed to just have a job with very structured way of thinking.
No, definitely. I can completely understand that. And so I'm sure when you were transitioning outside of that 9-to-5, we always have that security. We have that security. We know we're going to get paid. We have that security. We know what we're going to do. We have that security. We know what our responsibilities are. So when you get into entrepreneurship, you're really developing all of that out yourself and you're creating those sales and, those services and stuff like that. So I guess really what I want to know was, were you scared? Were you scared to jump out there and, get your feet wet, get your own business? Like, how was that? What was that feeling? When did you know it was like, I'm doing this and I ain't letting nothing stop me?
Well, I think fear played a huge role in like taking a while to really get started because I became a notary. I was able to sign up with signing services, work with title companies and do all that kind of stuff because there was a whole system already in place. You can kind of be taught that. So I can kind of mimic what other businesses are doing. But the fear really started when I realized in order to be successful, I had to create my own identity and start to forge my own path. And that's scary when you don't have a blueprint because there's only one of you. And so to be unique and to be dynamic, I think that's the sweet spot of success. So then you start to question yourself, because like a 9-to-5er has a roadmap. They have a guideline, they have process and procedures, they have outlined metrics of how to be successful. But in your own business, you create your own standards of success. You set your own goals. So then if you set them for yourself, it gets scary, because like, what if you fail? What does that say? And so for me, I would do all of this over-analyzing to the point where I would either self-sabotage or would just procrastinate so much that I just wouldn't get things done. And so now I realize, even though I still get afraid as I accomplish more things, I get nervous, I still have to take action. So the whole notion of like doing it afraid is real. And what I learned is that the discomfort of like the unknowns and not really knowing what's next and not really knowing if it's going to work out, you actually can get used to that discomfort and begin to associate it with growth territory. You begin to associate being uncomfortable and being afraid with, oh, I must be really moving if I'm feeling nervous. And so in the past, I would always be afraid. And so that would equal, okay, I'm in danger. I'm not going to take action because I should not be subjected to feeling scared. So I'm just not going to do a thing. But then I'm left with regret and shoulda, coulda, woulda. So now when I take chances, I feel like even if I didn't reach a goal or it didn't turn out exactly the way I wanted it, I'm successful because I pushed past the limitations of fear. Right. That's that in a nutshell. That's how I see it. So fear never really goes away. It could be self-doubt. It could be comparing yourself. It's just part of the human experience. It's just the same as other emotions that live within you. It's just a matter of managing it and giving it its place. So I'm learning how to like propel fear as a way to push me, because I'm also afraid of staying the same. I'm also afraid of not knowing the possibilities of trying. So I use it to work for me. And then there's always those moments when fear does get the best of you, but we live to see another day. We get back up and we try it again. And the more notches in my belt of being on the side of accomplishing things, and that just simply means like pushing past something that I thought that was so scary. Getting on the other side of that has built so much confidence in me. And so being on the side of confidence, whenever I get nervous and afraid, I'm thinking, I have a track record of overcoming. So now I know, okay, I got this example of how I was afraid, but I did it. I have this learning experience of how I was afraid and I did it and it didn't work out. So now I can try it again and again and again. And so I know it's a lot of successful people out here that still get in front of people, still, have really, really massive goals, and they're afraid. So fear is not a factor when it comes to accomplishing goals. It doesn't have to be, at least.
Yeah, no, you are absolutely right. And I just like how you were mentioning about having a growth territory. So when you said it, I never actually heard that phrase before. And based on the context clues in which you said it, it's just kind of like that opportunity or that space in order to grow. And a lot of the times that's on the other side of fear, like that pushing past it, not letting it limit you, kind of all the things that you were mentioning. But, give us an example of, growth territory or something that, you were a little reserved in doing and you pushed past it and you did it anyway. And what was the result of that?
So one example, just in general for anybody watching, a basic example, and then I'll give one about personal to my experience, is like when you exercise. If you've been really inactive and you go to the gym and you start lifting weights or you start jogging, you start doing anything, it is so uncomfortable. And then the day after, it's painful because your muscles have been impacted. But if you keep doing it, you push past it to the point where you start to see results. You start to look better. You may lose weight. You may build muscle. You may have more energy. And so you begin to associate with the discomforts of working out that your muscles are growing. You're building more endurance. So then you know that it's worth it. So growth territory for me as it relates to fear is that when I'm feeling really afraid, I know, and it's something that I really want to do, but the fear is holding me back. Oh, I got to do it. I have to do it. And because I'm going to be uncomfortable, that's associated with growth. So now I began, as I push past things that make me feel afraid, So I started to get nervous. I started to think of ways to back out of it. I'm like, okay, this is good, because once I get to the other side of it, I'm even better. So then then new challenges come up. So because I'm beginning to stretch myself. And so, like, for example, I recently did an interview with Matherin, his Matherin's Business Insights. So he invited me, shout out to Matherin.
The way.
And he invited me to come on his show and talk about my business, Freedom Notary Services. And I completely freaked out. In my head, I was trying to find all kinds of ways that this wouldn't work, just so I could feel safe and not take the chance of being put on a public stage and talk about myself. Like, what if I sound silly? What if he asks me a question I don't have an answer to? You know, what if I freeze up and I don't know what to say now, and it's live, so I'm humiliated. I had all these fears, and I'm thinking, I hope something happens and he just cancel it. But then I said, if I don't do this, then I won't be able to do things like this podcast. I won't be able to speak in front of other people and help change lives. I won't be able to do anything if I just keep running and keep trying to find ways to be safe. And I definitely don't want to be where I am, because I have so many places I want to go. So I have to become that. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do it. So I told him, I said, oh my goodness, thank you so much for inviting me. Even though I did not feel like that at all. I was like, thank you so much. I'm so excited. And I was just riddled with fear of who would be watching, what would they think. But I said, I'm going to do it, because I know however it turns out on the other side of this interview, it's going to be empowerment. It's going to be confidence. I'm going to now have the experience of doing something like this, so then I can do it again and do it better. So I was like, I don't care how I feel, I'm going to still take action. And it did not feel good. It felt scary. You know, all sorts of things happened during the interview. My daughter, a 4-year-old, interrupted the interview. My new earplugs was falling out. But I knew one thing, I was going to do it regardless of how I felt. And so once the interview was over and I looked at the replay, it was almost like magic. I felt so much better by doing it. And I did a damn good job in the interview. And so now I felt on fire. I was like, okay, I'm going to have these experiences again, but I'm ready for the next level. And so if I hadn't done that, then I would still be running and hiding from somebody asking me to do an interview, or me being on camera, or me posting on my social media. So I've learned personally, like, that whole experience, that month leading up to the interview, I knew I was in growth territory, because I knew no matter what, I was going to do it. And I knew that even though I was feeling scared, even though I was nervous, even though I had all these scenarios of what can go wrong, I was super clear that it was going to happen. So I knew that this is like almost like a social experiment. I'm really freaked out, but I'm going to do it. And once I do it, how am I going to feel? So I did it. You know, the added bonus is that I did well, but I was willing to take me screwing up. I was still going to do it. And then once I did it, and after that, I was like, I'm ready to interview with Oprah. I'm ready. I'm totally ready. And the funny thing is that, let's say, we're going to claim it. Let's say when Oprah calls me to interview me, I'm going to still feel afraid. I'm going to still feel nervous. But now I'm learning how to attach fear with growth, fear with something positive. Now, we're not talking about fear of somebody attacking me or being in the lion's den. That's natural fear that has been implanted in us, automatic, to protect ourselves. But the fear of all this limiting mental chatter, I'm learning how to manage that, because the other side of that is just so magical. It's so empowering, and it gives you so much more room to accomplish more things.
So I just have to harp on one point, and I think that is going to be the shift that people need. And you mentioned connecting fear with growth. Mm-hmm. That right there, first of all, that's a bar. It needs to be on a shirt. But more importantly, I think what you're really highlighting is that usually that anxiousness, the reserve, and, you know, kind of the things, it's always that step before you step into greatness that you're wondering, am I ready for it? What's going to happen when I get there? What if I don't live up to, you know, the potential that this other person is, you know, has for me? Because he picked you for a reason.
That's right.
He picked you for a reason. So that's the first thing. But it's like, it's so many times, like you said, we limit ourselves and we have this mental chatter where it's like, what if this happens? Or what if that happens? And like you were saying, when you're connecting fear with growth, you start to realize that, what if it happened?
Right. Yeah.
Now you know how to deal with it. And that's walking into that growth territory that you're saying. So anybody who's listening, anybody who's being fearful, I think it's about reconditioning your mind. And this is, one of those strategic tools, reconditioning our mind and starting to connect fear with growth, because you're most likely fearful of the unknown because it's something you have before. It's information that you don't know. And in terms of an interview, a lot of the times it's like, I don't know what questions I'm going to be asked, or I don't know how this is going to go. And it's you being prepared for anything will help you in your business as well, because every time you pick up the phone, you don't know who on the other side of that line.
That's right.
But you picking up the phone because you know that whatever it is going to grow your business, not only in profit, but in visibility, not only in visibility, but in confidence and ability and yourself. So I think, I'm using that myself. I'm about to put fear equal growth on a t-shirt.
That's right.
Fear equal growth, because it's true. It's absolutely true. So I appreciate you, sharing that and being transparent about that. And I know you kind of mentioned like fear doesn't really like go anywhere. So I think we both can come to an agreement that fear does not go away. But what are some of the things that you do now when you are getting fearful or you are a little bit anxious about something that you want to do, whether it is, a podcast interview or dropping an ebook, what are some of the ways that you kind of, helped push past that? Because you recently dropped the ebook. So please just give us a little bit about that, because I'm sure, it took time to put together, but putting something together and having it on your computer and putting it out there into the marketplace, right? That's another level of fear. That's not just conversational fear. That's another level. So give us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people have fear for tons of different reasons. Like for me, my fear of being vulnerable and, being put on a platform that people can criticize me or not like what I have to offer, and a host of other things. Like I can be real creative in my head, come up with all sorts of reasons why things don't work or why I may not be the one that a person may want or benefit from. But I'm learning to put fear in its rightful place, because fear will push you to do stuff. Fear will keep you safe. Fear may even keep you stagnant. Fear can kill your dreams. And so I know now, as soon as I get nervous, like even when we were preparing to do this episode, like I started getting all nervous and scared. I'm thinking, I'm going to freeze up. I'm going to say something crazy and we can't do a do-over because it's not organic. So, Oh my gosh. But I'm already programming myself that I'm feeling all that. I'm human, but that's not going to stop nothing. That's what it's going to do, is propel me to do my very best, because I'm not built to fail. I'm built to be successful. So I know that if I allow all this mental clutter to make the decisions for me, I'm not going to move and go to places I want to go. So when I released my ebook, which is called The Notary Pivot, a Notary's Guide to Transferring Your Knowledge into Digital Products. So my ebook, I wrote my ebook. I was excited about it. Like I was pretty much done. Nobody even knew about it, but I'm like, I accomplished that. But nobody's going to buy an ebook if I don't let people know it exists. In order to let people know it exists, I have to put myself out there. I have to advertise it. I have to talk to my audience. And so that's scary, because what if someone has a better product? Or what if no one thinks it's useful? Or what if they've read it and it's just, they don't like it? It's always going to be somebody that feels that way, because it's 9 billion people on this planet. So it's always someone that may not be in agreement. But I have to give myself that stamp of approval. And sometimes you can jump out there and take a chance and you may not feel validated yet. But by just pushing yourself past what you think your limits are, because fear will make you think your limits are behind you. And when you push yourself past where your previous limits are and you actually do it, you've already promoted yourself. And so when I released my ebook and then I started advertising, talking about it, talking to people on Instagram, posting videos and reels, each and every time I'm like so freaked out behind my phone. And each and every time I put it out, people give me positive feedback. And even if no one says anything, I'm like, I did it though. If I could do that, I can do this. And if I can do this, I can do the bigger things. And so now I realize, okay, it's never going to be a time when I'm going to have arrived where it's just easy breezy. Even the greatest people in the world that you see, you know, on magazines, they admit to being afraid. They admit to being unsure of themselves, but they found that recipe for success. They work on skill mastery, because that cuts back on fears and insecurities. And then they master execution. And when they couple those things together, the fear they're feeling, oh, that's just a little emotion.
Yep.
Even if it's massive, you know, even if you're a world-renowned star and you're coming in front of millions of people and you have mastery and you have all these accolades, people are human, they still get afraid. So I just know for me, I attach the nerves and the doubt, I associate that with success. So maybe, you know, it will be a blessing at some point that I won't get the same type of fear. And if I don't get that fear like that, then maybe I'm not growing anymore. It's time to graduate to the next thing.
Okay, I love that. And it's funny because I say that for myself. I always say that knowledge combats fear. And like you were saying, like mastering those skills of whatever it is that, you know, that you're fearful of, just having more information. It builds up your credibility, it builds up your confidence. And that really is in alignment with also doing it. That execution part, that part is really the biggest, because you can know a whole lot, right? And it can stay right inside of you because you're fearful of putting it out for all of the reasons that you mentioned so eloquently, I might add. But I think that, you know, you did such a great job of just illustrating how people can push past it. What are some, you know, tools, or even just like phrases, like people always get like caught up on like cliches, like, you know, it's always a cliche until you actually do something, you know, until you put some action behind it. And sometimes cliches is like, that's what I need. Listen, time gonna keep ticking. Like, time don't stand still. It's gonna keep moving. So I'm gonna move with it, or I'm gonna just be stagnant. I gotta move. So it's like whatever tool that you need to help you push past that, like you have to do it. So for me, my cliche is, I call it a cliche. My cliche is, you know, knowledge combats fear. So whenever I'm fearful of something, I know that I'm only fearful because I know that I feel like I need more knowledge in it. So if I get a phone call about something and I haven't done it before, then it's like, okay, let me reach out to people who have done it before. More. What part am I confused about? Let me get clarity on that section, because we know a lot more than we give ourselves credit to the majority of the time. And so it's very important to figure out, or really just uncover what the source of that fear is. Because like you said, it's an emotion. Emotions fleeting, right? So it's like, how can we help ourselves? How can we condition ourselves to move past these emotions that won't be there tomorrow?
That's right.
Show up in the same type of way. So definitely, I would love to learn, like, you know, so what are some of your strategic tools that you use to move past some of these limitations? I really like what you said, the chatter, the chatter in the mind. Sometimes it sounds loud. It sometimes is loud. You know what I mean? So how are you lowering that? How are you silencing those and just getting that extra oomph to move forward with whatever project it is that you're doing, including this podcast? Thank you so much.
Right. So like a large part of my life, I made decisions based on fear. So, and I was real clever with it. So if there was an opportunity that presented itself and it freaked me out, like if somebody wanted to offer me a job that would elevate my career, but it required me to stretch and grow and be in front of people or whatever, I could cleverly give them a reason why it wouldn't work without feeling like foolish for not doing it. So I almost justified me being afraid all the time, which was a habit that I maintained. And then I realized, but I'm not growing and I'm not being the person that I dream of being. And the number one thing that's stopping me is being afraid. And so I began to say, okay, I have to feel the fear and do it anyway. That's a quote I've read somewhere. So you can feel it and you can still do it. But the doing sometimes feels almost impossible, because how do you do it when you're paralyzed with fear? So I started to develop over the last few years, like literally a toolkit to manage my fears, because that's what held me back. It wasn't lack of skills. It wasn't the ability to articulate or write. It wasn't, building good relationships. I could do all that, but the fear became so massive because I had practiced it for so long and being loyal to my fears that it just seemed like it was something that I could never overcome. And so what I started to do, like a number of things I do, I journal in the morning, and if I'm feeling especially anxious or afraid of something for the day, I'll write it out. Sometimes I'll write a letter to my future self. So for instance, for the interview, I literally wrote a letter to myself for Saturday. So my interview was on Friday. This is real transparent, but I wrote a letter to myself on Saturday, which was the day after. So I was just like, I had such an amazing interview. I felt so confident, and I was able to reach so many people, talking to them about my story. So many people are going to love my ebook. I'm just so grateful to Mathurin in that interview. It was super awesome. And now I'm so excited to take my daughter to the playground. What a fantastic Saturday, because I did something I didn't think I could do. So I wrote that out, and I felt all the emotions associated with the overcoming and the relief of facing something that I was almost feeling transformed Friday morning. I'm thinking, oh, it's already done. It's in a bag. And so I did the interview. And by the way, right before the interview, I'm still afraid. I'm having a human experience. I'm stretching, I'm growing, I'm doing something that I never would have done years before. But I was very clear that this is just a feeling, like you said, Tiara, it's fleeting. And so I did the interview and it was over, and I did great. And then I read that journal entry, and I'm thinking, not only did I feel all these things, I feel even better. But that was a strategy to kind of help with the mental chatter, because just as much as we're thinking about all the negative things, we also have an option. We can choose to think positive things. It's just a matter of working that muscle, because it's a matter of habits. So if I start to tell myself affirmations all the time, you begin to believe it. So I began for so many years believe the things I'm afraid of, because I'm telling myself that subconsciously all the time. You know you can't do that, Corinne. You know that's not for you, girl. You know you're going to look silly because you never have done it before. And so it was a belief system. And so as I'm developing new beliefs, it's like a fish out of water, but it's proven just through reading and and another thing, surrounding yourself with fearless people. You feed off of that energy. So, the whole notion of you never want to be the smartest person in the room. You never want to be the most confident person in the room either. So if I'm surrounding myself like Tiara, you're super duper confident, super duper. And so because you take so many chances and you execute, and you may not have all the pieces together, but you'll do it anyway, and you do it naturally, I feed off of that. Just naturally, you become the people you spend a lot of time around. And so I've learned that if I'm around people who will say, Corinne, you sure you're going to do that? Oh, it couldn't be me. Those are not the people who are going to help you grow. So I start to share more big, audacious goals with people who will be like, of course it's possible. Yes. And here's some ideas to make it even easier. And so then I realized, oh, it is. And what you may not even realize until you look back at it, you're like, I did this, I did that, I did this. And so it's good to take some time to assess your growth, because then you can then start telling yourself new stories like, oh, wow, I used to be so afraid of this because I used to tell myself that, but this is my new dialogue in my head. And so when we take the time to kind of look back at things that we've overcome, even though we were afraid, then we can start dreaming bigger. And then I also think the last thing in my toolkit, I think how dare I be so selfish and not share my gifts with the world? Because I make it all about myself. I'm so self-absorbed with how I'm feeling. that I don't even take the time to share my story to someone who it could change the trajectory of their life. Like, how selfish is that? And when I take the time to not put the attention all on me, it becomes like almost like a relief. Because when we're helping somebody else, we're adding value, we're pouring into them, and we're not even thinking about ourselves. And that helps too. So even with the interview that I gave as an example, when I start thinking there's somebody that's going to listen to this interview and is going to be inspired by my story, it may propel them to make a particular decision that moves them closer to their goals just by me showing up, even though I'm scared. They don't know I'm scared. And so by taking like little things that you can create in your own toolkit that make you feel better, I just replicate that with the next challenge, So then what ends up happening is that the next challenge that comes up in my life, I'm gonna feel all afraid. I'm gonna naturally think of how can I get out of this? Because you have to like fight or flight in yourself. But then you know, based on history, that you can overcome this too. And don't get me wrong, there are times when maybe it's something you shouldn't be doing at that time. And that's when you have to just make a decision and you surround yourself with positive people who can kind of help you, guide you. But you know when you're just having some limited beliefs, you know that. And it's up to you. You know, you can understand. We lie to ourselves too. So it's time to tell the truth. And when I started to tell myself the truth, like, Corinne, you just feeling insecure and you scared, cut it out, just do it anyway. I started to grow in ways I just never thought was possible.
So I love that. First of all, you gave so many gems. So I just want to recap them. And if I forget any, please correct me, add to it, everything like that. So we got Corinne's Fear Toolkit. Right? So we have journaling. We have writing a letter to our future self. So the feelings that we feel after we've accomplished them or overcame whatever it is that we're doing. Surrounding yourself with positive people and people who are going to encourage you. And what was the last one? Oh, sharing your gifts, sharing your gems, sharing your value, because you do not know who it is you're going to impact and how it's going to impact them. And it's crazy because I literally never thought about fear as being selfish, but I like that because it takes away from like the gravity of it. It takes away from, like you said, the self-absorption. Like, you know, what are you fearful of? How other people view you is not about how other people view you. The people that it don't resonate with, it ain't for them.
That's right.
The people that you don't know who is going to resonate with. That's the whole thing. Just like people say, you never know who's watching you. Just keep going. You never know who you're inspiring. Just keep going. You never know who's falling in love with your smile. Just keep smiling. And so it takes away from.
I can see. Yep.
All right. It takes away from making it so much about us. And for some reason, it's kind of weird, but it does alleviate that feeling of interesting. And that's when, this is really why we wanted to do this podcast, because it's all psychological. And once you learn how to train your mind, once you learn those tools, or you build up those tools to help you reframe your minds, you are literally unstoppable. Exactly how you said, you're literally unstoppable. So first of all, that toolkit is gold. I love that. I think that is something that people should start creating for themselves. Toolkit. Create a toolkit for yourself. What are the things that you need to do to help push past whatever it is that you want to push past, and use it. It's important. It's personalized. It's you. And when we take that time to understand what it is that we need, that's soul care.
That's it.
That's soul care. Yeah. So I really love that. Man, I don't even know what else to go with this. I want people to take in and really just resonate with everything that you've shared so far. What
I want for people, not to cut you off here, how I want them to walk away is not taking Corinne's toolkit, because I have my own particular journey, my own reasons for being afraid, my own limitations that I have in my head. What I recommend is assessing what you're afraid of, why you're afraid of it, and then figuring out ways to kind of ease the burden as you make the decision to move forward. For one, you have to say, whatever it is I'm afraid of, is it worth having? Is it worth it? If it's something, and I'm quite sure it is, because that's why you're having all the feels about it that's keeping you. And then you got to say, well, what am I willing to give up to do it? So I was willing to allow myself to be vulnerable to get to the other side. I was willing to go ahead and take that chance. And then I'm saying, okay, so how do I cross the bridge feeling vulnerable? Because I feel like I can't. So that's when I designed my own toolkit, and I customize it over time. I realized journaling really helps me, you know, and there may be seasons in my life where exercise has to be. Maybe I got to run on the treadmill to get all the fear out, and then I feel more energized, and then I do a thing. So you just got to figure out what it is, but the underlying goal here is just to do it. And you got to figure out what works, because I don't think people are just waking up afraid and they're just so bold, they just do it anyway. They have a system. They may not think it through or articulate it, but they have a system. It could be a series of affirmations. It could be visualization. It could be talking to an accountability partner. It could be mimicking someone who has overcome. I mean, it's endless. You just have to find what works for you.
Absolutely. And like you said, it's so many things. It can be prayer. It can be, you know, watching someone, you know, something, listening to something to kind of build them up. It could be watching somebody else, like you said, do it and be like, all right, they're a person like I'm a person. If they can do it, I can do it. It don't
That's
have
right.
Sometimes it's listening to someone a little bit, you know, worse. So I feel like for me, I subscribe to perfectionism, and that is limitations. It's limiting as well, but it's like when you become stagnant because it's not perfect, but then you look at all these people who, you know, maybe have a speech impediment, or, you know, they draw blanks, and, you know, and they keep going, they keep
That's
doing
right.
like, why am I not doing this? But it's so important to, like Corinne said, having your own personalized toolkit, learning yourself and what it is, why you're fearful of it, and where is that really like stemming from? And then you basically are building tools around that. Yeah. So write it down. For me, writing it down, make it real. So write it down. I'm not a big journaler. I'm trying to get to it. I am, because I just see how much it has helped people. I'm just such an audible, you know, type of person, an audible processor. But unless I'm recording what it is I'm saying, I done said it and it's gone. It's in the universe. It's not the same. It doesn't hold the same weight because you can't really track that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's super important to, you know, write stuff down. So here's an exercise for you guys, because we're all about giving strategic tools. So this is an exercise. Figure out some of the things that you're fearful of. Write them down. Write down what's the cause of that fear. Why do you think you feel it? What are some of the feelings that you get around it? Do you get like anxious? Does your palms get sweaty? Do you like feel like, you know, you're like drawing blanks or whatever it is? Like, start writing down the symptoms that's associated with that fear. And then what are some of the things that make you feel better? Sometimes you have to start super small, but then you kind of, you know, transcribe those over, and then you start to personalize them. I know when before I do a wedding, I'm always like, oh my gosh, like, what if I mess up? What if I pronounce something wrong? Girl, I just pray that God take over my tongue, Lord. Take over my speech, Lord, my timing, my confidence, everything. And for me, I just feel so much better. Am I still nervous? Absolutely, because it's, you know, someone's important day. But at the same time, it's like they picked you for a reason. You were given this ability for a reason. And so sometimes for me, I got to give it to God. That's one of the things in my toolkit. But I like to listen to sermons. Like you said, exercising really helps as well. But you have to figure out what works for you. I'm gonna try journaling though. I know journaling works for you.
But no, if journaling is not your jam, then you're gonna be okay. So try it. Like for me, I'm a writer. I'm an introvert, so I'm always in my head. And sometimes what I'm thinking can work against me because I'm always in my head, and my fears get mixed up in it, and I start thinking it is true. So when I write, I'm like having like a brain dump. It's like therapy. It's coming out. I'm writing it. It's written. And I'm affirming the things that are true. I am negating the things that are not. So for me, that's just how I process. For you, maybe writing it one time, writing down a few affirmations and then putting it up on the wall for the week. And then you looking at that and reaffirming whatever it is you need for your soul to get over whatever you're worried about that week. Maybe the visual of something you wrote down one time could be helpful. Like I collect journals. Like I'm always, look,
Yes,
I'm always writing. I figured out, I know what works for me. And so whatever works for you, don't try to reinvent the wheel. It's worth a try. Some people just don't care to write. I try to get my son to journal and through his feelings. He was like, ain't nobody trying to do that. So he doesn't do that, but it works for me. And when you find something that you find effective, just kind of wear it out. And then you find something new. And at some point, maybe I won't journal as much because I don't have as much anxiety, or I don't need to manage my mental clutter. I may find that I need to do more engaging with other people to get their perspectives, because my one narrow-minded perspective may not be all the possibilities. All those things kind of feed into building your confidence.
Yeah. No, you are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. I really enjoyed this. I feel like you gave me some things to think about. I need to go and write down what's in my toolkit, honestly, because sometimes I'm looking for something like, okay, I know why I'm feeling this way, but like, how can I move past this feeling? And when you have everything in your mind, once that fear come in, once that mental chatter come in, sometimes it just feels like it's just a little bit more powerful than what you know. For me, I'm always talking about gratitude. I'm always trying to express gratitude. I try to live my life being grounded in gratitude. And sometimes it's just reframing a sentence. I'm grateful for the opportunity to do this.
Right.
And sometimes that's literally all that I need. So it is definitely about figuring out what it is that you need as an individual, and moving forward like that. And I want to say, Corinne, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming here. Thank you so much for being transparent, being vulnerable, sharing some of the things that you've dealt with in terms of fear, and also how you push past it. Because again, our whole mission with this podcast is to share those strategic tools, because that's how you build that business mindset. And you build that business mindset by releasing those limitations and reframing exactly, those times where you don't know what it is that you want to do. It's okay.
That's right. It's
okay. Reframe that sentence. You might not know what you want to do now. You might not know how you're going to get there at that point in time, but that's something that you want to do.
Right. Yep. Yeah. That's it. That's it in a nutshell.
Yes. Awesome. So congratulations on your ebook.
Thank you so much.
And if you need a coach, please book my girl, because you're going to grow from it. You're going to grow, you're going to stretch. And that is super important, as we know, in this industry, being an entrepreneur. We're going to drop everything in the description, how to connect with Corinne, how to get her book, how to set up your coaching call, and of course, connecting with her on her platforms. Follow her.
Thank you.
At name?
Freedom Notary, at Freedom Notary on Instagram.
Perfect. So make sure you follow Corinne at Freedom Notary on Instagram. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Womenomics Podcast.
Womenomics Podcast.
Womenomics Podcast.